I am thinking of breaking up with my boyfriend after meeting his family. I can't tell if I'm being overdramatic. I'm Alice, a 28-year-old graphic designer, navigating the waters of my first serious relationship. For years, my dating life consisted of casual dates and brief encounters that never blossomed into anything substantial. That was until I met Andy. We crossed paths at a mutual friend's art exhibit just over a year ago, and his easy charm and genuine interest in my work drew me in. Andy, with his supportive nature and shared passion for art, quickly became the anchor I had been searching for. Our relationship has been a journey of discovery and growth. Andy is my first proper boyfriend, and with him, I've experienced the joys and challenges of a committed relationship. He's been my confidant, my cheerleader, and my partner in crime. Despite my initial nervousness about diving into something so serious, Andy's unwavering support and kindness have made it easier to open up and trust. Last weekend, Andy invited me to his father's birthday dinner, describing it as a small family gathering. I was told it would be an intimate affair with just his parents and siblings, a perfect opportunity for me to get to know them better. Given my anxiety around large groups of people, this assurance was a relief. I wanted to make a good impression, and the idea of a low-key dinner was something I felt I could handle. As we arrived at Andy's family home, a sprawling estate that spoke volumes about his family's wealth, my nerves began to flutter, but I reassured myself, remembering Andy's words about the small gathering. However, stepping through the grand entrance, I was immediately taken aback. The house was filled with people, an overwhelming mix of aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, great-grandparents, and even distant relatives Andy hadn't seen in years. The unexpected crowd sent a jolt of anxiety through me. The house buzzed with energy, conversations overlapping, laughter echoing, and the clinking of glasses and cutlery. The grand hall, with its high ceilings and elegant decor, was bustling with activity. I felt a wave of panic but tried to maintain my composure. Clinging to Andy's side, I greeted his relatives, attempting to engage in polite conversation despite my mounting anxiety. As we moved through the crowd, Andy introduced me with a proud smile. "This is Alice, my girlfriend." Each introduction was met with polite nods and smiles, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being out of place. The sheer volume of people and the intensity of the social setting made me even more reliant on Andy's presence. Finally, we were seated for dinner in the beautifully adorned dining hall. I hoped the meal would bring a sense of calm, allowing me to settle my nerves and perhaps enjoy the evening. Little did I know, the most challenging part of the night was yet to come. Andy's mother, seated at the head of the table, turned her attention to me, setting the stage for an uncomfortable confrontation that would test the strength of my relationship with Andy and my ability to stand up for myself. As we pulled up to Andy's family home, I was struck by the grandeur of the estate. The house, with its stately columns and sprawling lawn, looked like something out of a movie. My nerves fluttered, but I reminded myself that this was supposed to be a small family gathering. As Andy parked the car, he squeezed my hand reassuringly. "It's going to be fine," he said with a smile. We walked up the steps and into the house, and my first impression was one of warmth and opulence. The grand foyer was decorated tastefully with family portraits and elegant furnishings. However, as we moved further inside, it became clear that this was no small gathering. The buzz of numerous conversations filled the air, and the sight of so many unfamiliar faces made my heart race. Andy led me through the crowded hall, introducing me to various relatives. Along the way, my anxiety grew with each new introduction. "This is Alice, my girlfriend," he repeated over and over, his voice blending into the cacophony of greetings and small talk. I smiled and shook hands, trying to remember names and faces, but it was overwhelming. I clung to Andy's side, my lifeline in this sea of unfamiliarity. Every now and then, he would give me a reassuring look or squeeze my hand, but I could tell he was also trying to catch up with family he hadn't seen in a while. I felt guilty for needing so much of his attention, but my anxiety made it hard to let go. One of the first relatives we met was Andy's Aunt Karen, a tall woman with a booming voice and a penchant for dramatic stories. She greeted me warmly, but immediately launched into a long-winded tale about her recent travels. I nodded and smiled, but I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Karen's enthusiasm was overwhelming, and I struggled to keep up with her rapid-fire anecdotes. Next, we encountered Andy's cousin, Michael, a charming man in his early 30s who seemed to know everyone. He gave Andy a hearty handshake and then turned to me with a charismatic smile. "So, you're the famous Alice I've heard so much about," he exclaimed. I blushed, unsure how to respond. Michael's easy charm made me feel even more out of place, as if I was the only one struggling to fit in. As we moved through the crowd, I couldn't help but notice the curious glances and whispered comments. Andy's family was clearly close-knit, and I was the outsider, trying to find my place. My anxiety was a constant undercurrent, making it hard to focus on any one conversation. I found myself relying on Andy more and more to navigate the social setting. Finally, we reached the dining room, a grand space with a long table set for dinner. The table was beautifully decorated with fine china, crystal glasses, and elaborate floral arrangements. Andy's mother, Helen, was overseeing the seating arrangements, and she greeted us with a warm but slightly scrutinizing smile. "Hello, Alice. It's nice to finally meet you," she said, her tone polite but with an edge that made me uneasy. I smiled and thanked her, feeling the weight of her gaze. As everyone settled into their seats, I found myself seated between Andy and his sister, Claire. Claire, a woman in her mid-20s with a kind smile, leaned over and whispered, "Don't worry, it's always a bit overwhelming at these gatherings. Just stick with Andy, and you'll be fine." Her words were comforting, but the anxiety continued to gnaw at me. As the dinner progressed, I tried to engage in the conversations around me, but it was difficult to keep up. Helen, seated at the head of the table, often directed questions my way, each one feeling like a test. "So, Alice, what do you do for work?" she asked. I explained my job as a graphic designer, and she nodded, her expression unreadable. It was during one of these conversations that Helen asked the question that set the tone for the rest of the evening. "Is Andy your first boyfriend?" she inquired, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. I nodded, confirming that he was. Helen raised an eyebrow and said, "I guess I can excuse it then." Confused, I asked her what she meant. "You've been clinging to Andy all night," she said bluntly. "It's understandable if he's your first boyfriend, but he needs his space too." The words stung, and I felt a rush of embarrassment. I tried to explain my anxiety and how the large gathering was overwhelming for me, but Helen was unmoved. "He's a man, Alice. He needs his freedom," she said dismissively. Before I could respond, Andy intervened. "Mom, can we not do this now? It's Dad's birthday," he said, his tone frustrated but calm. I felt a surge of gratitude toward him, but also a pang of disappointment that he didn't fully defend me. As dinner continued, I noticed the occasional sidelong glances and whispered comments from other family members. I felt isolated and uncomfortable, the sense of being an outsider growing stronger. Claire tried to engage me in conversation, offering support in her own quiet way, but it wasn't enough to dispel the tension. Feeling overwhelmed and close to tears, I leaned over to Andy and whispered, "I don't feel well. I think I need to leave." He looked concerned, but nodded, helping me excuse myself from the table. As we left the dining room, I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me. Outside I broke down, tears streaming down my face. I felt so attacked in there. "Andy," I sobbed. "And you didn't stand up for me. You didn't tell them how anxious I was, or that you initiated some of the hand-holding." Andy looked stricken. "I'm so sorry, Alice. I didn't realize how bad it was for you. I just didn't want to make a scene at Dad's birthday dinner." "I understand. But it still hurts," I said, wiping my tears. "I don't know if I can be with someone who won't defend me when I need it." He started crying too, pleading with me not to leave him. "I love you, Alice. Please don't go. I'll do better, I promise." "I need time to think," I replied, my heart heavy. With that, I got into my car and drove home, feeling more confused and hurt than ever before. The next few days were a blur of emotions. Andy sent me messages, apologizing and asking for forgiveness, but I needed space to process everything. I talked to friends and family, seeking advice and trying to understand my own feelings. Claire reached out to me as well, apologizing on behalf of the family and expressing regret for not doing more to support me. Her message brought some comfort, but the pain of that night still lingered. I found myself questioning the relationship, wondering if Andy could truly stand by me in difficult situations. The love I felt for him was still strong, but so were my doubts about our future. I knew I had to make a decision, one that would shape the path of our relationship moving forward. After the confrontation at the dinner table, I felt utterly shattered. My emotions were a whirlwind of embarrassment, anger, and sadness. Helen's words echoed in my mind, each repetition making me feel smaller and more out of place. The judgmental looks from the family members didn't help. I felt like an intruder who had violated some unspoken code of conduct. As I sat there, trying to keep my composure, Claire, Andy's sister, leaned over and whispered, "It's okay, Alice. I feel that way sometimes, too." Her words were a lifeline, a small but significant gesture of empathy in a room where I felt so alienated. I glanced at Claire, grateful for her support, but it wasn't enough to stem the tide of humiliation and isolation washing over me. I tried to focus on the conversations around me, but all I could hear were Helen's cutting remarks and the lack of support from Andy. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt on the verge of tears. The rest of the meal passed in a blur. I barely touched my food, too overwhelmed to eat. I kept my head down, avoiding eye contact, wishing I could disappear. Every glance in my direction felt like a dagger, and I could feel my anxiety spiraling out of control. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, I leaned over to Andy and whispered, "I don't feel comfortable here. I think I need to leave." He looked at me, concern etched on his face, and nodded. "Okay, let's go." I stood up, my legs feeling shaky. "I'm sorry, but I'm not feeling well. I'm going to head home," I said to the table, my voice trembling. There were murmurs of concern and polite expressions of sympathy, but no one made an effort to stop me. I felt like an outsider, tolerated, but not welcomed. Andy followed me out of the dining room, and as soon as we were outside, the tears I had been holding back came pouring out. I felt so attacked. "In there, Andy," I sobbed, my voice breaking. "Your mother humiliated me in front of everyone, and you didn't stand up for me." Andy looked stricken. "I'm so sorry, Alice. I didn't realize how bad it was for you. I just didn't want to make a scene at my dad's birthday dinner." I shook my head, wiping away tears. "I understand that, but it still hurts. I felt so alone there. And you didn't even mention that you initiated some of the hand-holding and sticking together." He started crying too, his voice desperate. "I love you, Alice. Please don't go. I'll do better, I promise. I'll talk to my mom. Just please don't leave me." "I need time to think," I said, my heart heavy with pain and confusion. "I don't know if I can be with someone who won't defend me when I need it most." Andy reached for my hand, his eyes pleading. "I understand, take all the time you need, but please know that I love you and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right." I nodded, feeling torn. "I love you too, Andy. But I need space right now." With that, I got into my car and drove home, the tears flowing freely. The drive was a blur, my mind racing with thoughts and emotions. When I finally reached my apartment, I collapsed on the couch, feeling utterly drained. The next few days were a mix of emotional turmoil and deep reflection. I received several messages from Andy, each one more apologetic than the last. He expressed his regret for not standing up for me and promised to talk to his mother about what happened. Despite his efforts, I needed space to process my feelings. Claire reached out as well. She called me the day after the dinner and apologized on behalf of the family. "I'm really sorry about what happened, Alice. I should have done more to support you. My mom can be very direct, and I know her words were hurtful." I appreciated her apology and told her as much. "Thank you, Claire. It means a lot to hear that. I felt so out of place and attacked. Your support helped, even if it was just a few words." "I understand," she said gently. "If you ever want to talk or need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm here for you." Her kindness was a small comfort, but the pain of that night still lingered. I replayed the events over and over in my mind, questioning everything. Was I overreacting? Was I being too sensitive? Or was I justified in feeling hurt and unsupported? I sought advice from close friends, hoping their perspectives would help me see things more clearly. Most of them were supportive, validating my feelings and urging me to prioritize my well-being. "You deserve someone who will stand up for you, Alice," one friend said. "It's important that Andy understands that." Another friend suggested I talk to a therapist to help process my emotions and gain clarity. "It might help to have an objective perspective," she said. "Someone who can help you work through your feelings and figure out what you need." Taking her advice, I scheduled an appointment with a therapist. During our sessions, I talked about my anxiety, the confrontation with Helen, and my disappointment with Andy's response. The therapist helped me unpack my feelings and explore my needs in the relationship. Through this process, I realized that my self-worth couldn't be tied to Andy's actions or his family's acceptance. I needed to prioritize my own mental health and well-being. I also recognized that while I loved Andy, I needed him to be a partner who would stand by me, even in difficult situations. After several days of reflection and therapy, I felt ready to talk to Andy again. We agreed to meet at a park, where we could have some privacy and a calm environment. When we met, I could see the worry and hope in Andy's eyes. He took my hands in his and said, "Alice, I've been doing a lot of thinking. I talked to my mom, and she understands that what she said was wrong. I'm so sorry for not standing up for you. I promise I'll do better." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and residual hurt. "I appreciate that, Andy. But this is about more than just one incident. I need to know that you'll be there for me, that you'll support me even when it's hard." "I will, Alice, I promise. I love you. And I don't want to lose you," he said, his voice earnest. "I love you too," I replied. "But I need to see that support in action. We need to work on this together if we're going to move forward." He agreed, and we talked about how we could improve our communication and support for each other. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was a necessary one. We both acknowledged our love for each other and our commitment to making the relationship work. As we left the park, hand in hand, I felt a tentative sense of hope. The future was uncertain, but I knew that I was stronger for having faced these challenges head on, and whatever came next, I was ready to face it with an open heart and a clearer understanding of my own worth. The days following the confrontation at the dinner table were filled with a mix of emotions: hurt, confusion, anger, and a deep sense of betrayal. I couldn't shake the feeling of isolation I had experienced that night, nor could I forget Helen's cutting remarks and Andy's lack of immediate support. The humiliation still stung, and I found myself questioning everything about our relationship. I spent hours replaying the event in my mind, each time feeling a fresh wave of pain. How could Andy, someone who professed to love me, not stand up for me in front of his family? His reluctance to defend me, to acknowledge my anxiety, left me feeling vulnerable and alone. I started to wonder if this was a one-time oversight or a sign of deeper issues in our relationship. During this period, Andy's messages came frequently. They were filled with apologies and promises to do better, but each one felt like a band-aid on a wound that needed more than just superficial healing. "I'm so sorry for what happened, Alice. I should have stood up for you. Please forgive me." Read one message. "I talked to my mom, and she understands that she was out of line. I promise I'll support you better in the future," said another. Despite his words, my doubts lingered. Was I overreacting? Was I expecting too much? Or was this an important test of our relationship, one that had revealed critical weaknesses? I needed clarity, and for that, I turned to my close friends and a counselor. My friends were a mixed bag of reactions, but most were supportive and empathetic. "Alice, you have every right to feel hurt," said Sarah, my best friend. "You deserve a partner who stands up for you, especially in front of his family. It's not about causing a scene, it's about showing solidarity." Another friend, Jessica, was more pragmatic. "Maybe Andy just didn't know how to handle the situation. It was his dad's birthday, and he might have been trying to keep the peace, but he should definitely make it up to you and prove that he can support you moving forward." These conversations helped, but I still felt a need for a more structured approach to understanding my feelings. So, I made an appointment with a therapist. During our sessions, I opened up about my anxiety, the dinner incident, and my relationship with Andy. Feeling unsupported by your partner, especially in a challenging situation, can be very distressing. My therapist said, "It's important to communicate your needs and expectations clearly." "Have you told Andy exactly how you feel and what you need from him?" I nodded. "Yes, I have. He says he understands and promises to do better, but I'm still unsure. It's hard to shake off the feeling of being let down." "That's understandable," she replied. "Trust is built through consistent actions over time. It's not just about promises, but about seeing those promises turn into actions. You need to decide if you're willing to give him that chance." Her words resonated with me. It wasn't just about what Andy said, it was about what he did. Moving forward, trust had been shaken, and it would take time and effort to rebuild it. In the following days, I continued to reflect deeply on our relationship. I remembered the good times, the laughter, the shared interests, and the genuine affection we had for each other. Andy had been a source of support in many ways, but this incident had exposed a significant gap. One evening, I sat down with a notebook and listed out my thoughts and feelings. On one side, I wrote down all the things I loved about Andy and our relationship. On the other, I listed the concerns in the areas where I felt unsupported. This exercise helped me see things more clearly. With these lists in hand, I felt more prepared to have a serious conversation with Andy about our future. I needed to communicate my feelings clearly and see if he was truly committed to making the necessary changes. The evening air was cool, as Andy and I sat on a bench in the park, the sun dipping below the horizon. We had decided to meet here to have one final conversation about the dinner incident and our relationship moving forward. I felt a mix of nervousness and determination, ready to lay everything on the table. "Andy, I want to talk about what happened at your dad's birthday dinner," I began, my voice steady. "I felt hurt and humiliated by what your mother said, and I needed you to stand up for me. It wasn't just about that moment, it was about feeling supported and respected in our relationship." Andy nodded, his expression serious and attentive. "I understand, Alice. I've thought a lot about it, and I realize now how important it is for me to support you, especially in front of my family. I'm truly sorry for not doing that." Taking a deep breath, I continued. "I appreciate your apology, but I need to see changes. I need to know that you will stand by me and defend me when necessary. Your family dynamics are something we need to address together. I can't feel like an outsider every time we're with them." Andy reached for my hand, holding it gently. I promise I will do better. Alice, I've talked to my mom about her behavior, and she understands that she crossed a line. Moving forward, I'll make sure to set boundaries with my family and ensure that you feel welcome and respected. Hearing his commitment was a relief, but I knew actions would speak louder than words. Thank you, Andy. It means a lot to hear you say that. I also need us to communicate better. If something bothers you or me, we need to talk about it openly and honestly. He squeezed my hand and smiled softly. Agreed. I want to work on this with you. You're important to me, and I don't want to lose what we have. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, letting the weight of our conversation settle. I felt a sense of closure and a cautious optimism for our future. I knew rebuilding trust would take time, but Andy's willingness to address the issues gave me hope. Reflecting on everything, I realized how much I had learned about myself and our relationship. I had learned the importance of setting boundaries and advocating for my own needs. I understood that a strong relationship required mutual support and respect, especially in challenging situations. I also learned that Andy, despite his initial hesitation, was willing to grow and change for the sake of our relationship. This incident, while painful, had the potential to strengthen our bond if we both committed to improving our communication and support for each other. As we walked back to our cars, hand in hand, I felt a renewed sense of clarity. I knew that future challenges would arise, but I felt better equipped to handle them. We would face them together, with open hearts and a commitment to each other's well-being. In the end, this experience taught me the value of resilience and the importance of standing up for myself. It also reinforced my belief in the power of love and partnership. With Andy by my side, I felt ready to navigate whatever came next, confident in our ability to grow stronger together.